In the 1990s, we had this run-up in NASDAQ and generally worldwide in internet shares and in what you call TMT, but also in new media and technology and software and so on. And many of the companies that were investing there, they made the mistake that they just said, okay, here's an interesting sector, here are the players, we invest in some of these players, and then probably they will share the market. What turned out is that in many of these areas, there would be one company that would end up making something like 80% of all the profits in that area. And what investors sometimes did wrong was they did not look closely enough at whether a company had network effects. So what turns out is that if you are the one who has the biggest network effect, which is very often the first network effect in a new sector, then you end up having 80% of the profit. And then there are lots of smaller companies that struggle. And the reason I find that so important is that once you do have a network effect, you are recruiting the users, the clients, maybe even suppliers, but people outside your organization to build your organization for you. And it becomes viral and it feeds on itself. And if you are ahead of anybody else in the same market with a network effect, it can become a bigger barrier to competition than anything else. That it's bigger than a patent, bigger than economies of scale, anything else, because it feeds on itself and you're recruiting anybody outside. So how do you build that? Let me start with one that is one of my favorites and which is also one of the ones that people very often ignore. And that is the Trojan horse. So it is that your company is young. It could have a network effect, but it doesn't have it yet. And you know, the history shows that if you don't manage to build up an efficient network effect within 2 years, you'll probably never get it. So within the next 2 years, we have to build a network effect. How do we do that? How about making an alliance with another company that has a network effect? So you make your product a part of their product. So certainly you're embedded in their product and you get access to their enormous network. And then once that works, you start nursing it as if it was your own network. This can be a very good mutual alliance if your network effect doesn't disturb their network effect, or they are mutually beneficial. It's a great deal. But that's a great way to do it. There's something called the viral factor. And it works like this. For instance, if I distribute 1,000 videos on YouTube and the viral factor is 0.5, then on average every second recipient of my video will send it out to another one. So it will go 1,000 people get it in the first place, then it's distributed to another 500, goes to 250, 125, and so on. If we ignore people sending forth and back to the same, within the same group, it would add up to about 2,000. So a viral factor of 0.5 doubles the number of people who see it. What happens if the viral factor is 2? So 1,000 people sends it to 2,000, 2,000 sends it to 4, 4 sends it to 8, and so on. So it goes on and it can become millions, millions. So companies that create a viral factor that is more than 1 can become incredibly valuable, even if they're tiny and even if they're young. And that is why sometimes smart investors, they have invested in very young companies that demonstrated a viral factor substantially over 1 at valuations that seemed insane. And the people were laughing at these valuations. But they were not insane because they were focusing on the network effect and they understood the value of this network effect. And they were willing to pay for it, and what seemed to be ridiculously high valuations turned out in retrospect to be very good decisions, very good valuations, because these companies grew like crazy. So two-sided network effect is what you have, for instance, when you want to make a booking service for a restaurant, for hotels, something like that. So it only works if a lot of restaurants support the app and a lot of people use the app. If one of them is not populated, is not active, the other one will lose interest. So what you should do is, or what you often should do is focus entirely on one part. I would say the restaurants here. So you go out first to the restaurants and then you say, we want to sign up the best restaurants. At least that's a way to do it. We want to sign up the best restaurants in this area. And once we have enough, we're going to offer the app to the public. Maybe we tell the restaurants, we're only doing this for the 10% best restaurants in town. This is very exclusive. So if they think, why should we do that? You want a little fee for booking, why should we spend that money? But then they think, if you're making a list of the 10% best restaurants and we are not on the list, that doesn't look good. So we want to be on a list of the 10% best. So you go on a list. So you make exclusivity and you use a niche strategy. So those are two ways to do it. But in any case, you focus on getting one side right without doing anything for the other side. Because if you're trying to do both sides, then you'll easily run into an obvious chicken and egg problem. Both of the sides can see that the other one is not really populated. So you populate one, and then when that is populated, you make a big campaign to populate the other. So how can you make that campaign? One way is to recruit people to recruit other people. An example is M-Pesa in Kenya, which is a mobile phone payment service. So they would recruit people that would be interested in making a payment, and they would reward them for finding people to receive the payments. So one worked for the other. Another example, an odd example, is you want to make a bar. The bar has to be a meeting place, and in order to work, you think there should be a fairly equal number of women and men. Problem is there's nobody. So how do you populate that? Okay, so you arrange so that there are free drinks for women for a while. Free drinks for women. The women will come. So you know that if the women come, the men will come also. So you prime the pump by focusing one side and the other side comes. So that is actually a bit easier perhaps than doing the restaurant booking app. One of the problems in starting a network is often that there needs to be some kind of content. The obvious case was, for instance, when YouTube launched. Actually, the first videos that were supplied to YouTube were supplied by the founders because there was no content at all. So self-supply is expensive, it's labor intensive, it's costly and so on, but it can be a way of priming the pump for a network effect. There's another way of doing it, which is a bit unusual, but I've seen it, for instance, in the Danish-American company Tvede, which is a site for people interested in tattoos. That was they went out at the beginning, at the outset of the company, and found the 100 best tattoo artists in the world, and then they offered each of them a small stake of the company. So after that, of course, these people, they had a great interest in the success of the company, so they would talk about it, they would supply content and so on. So that also primes the pump for a potential network effect, and in this case, they got a huge network effect. Let me end this by saying a few comments about how important network effects can be. I have been at so many investor meetings where I was either pitching for somebody to invest in my company, or I've seen somebody pitch me to invest in their company. The most obvious common question is, does it scale? But the second most obvious common question after that is, does it have a network effect? And if it doesn't have a network effect, it can still be a great viable business, but it's another league. The companies that have a great network effects can be mind-blowing. So please think about the possibilities you have of creating a network effect and the tactics you will use to implement it. It's worthwhile.
Newsfeed future.